Hi there. We will be discussing today about Israel's religious life in captivity. We had discussed this before, like Babylon. This is regarding Babylonian captivity. Okay, a country nearby who was a superpower, Babylon, and that Babylon attacked Israel, and Israel was in captivity nearly 70 years. So, what were the reasons why it had gone into captivity, and what were the consequences? What were the effects that happened in Israel's people's religious lives and their thoughts and their thinking? We will be discussing that. Okay. So, these two pictures you need to keep in mind. First picture you can see, it is the destroyed temple of Jerusalem. Okay, and one more picture is there in front of you, which is a Jewish synagogue. Israelites were Jewish people, and they prayed in the synagogues. So these two pictures you need to keep in mind. At the end, we will come to the conclusion. At that time, you will understand the link between these two pictures. Okay, the destroyed temple of Jerusalem and the Jewish synagogue. What is the link between Babylonian captivity and these two pictures? Okay, we will move forward. So, the giving you a brief about the background, you can see in the picture there were superpowers, two superpowers. One is the Assyrian superpower, which were the nearby um, neighboring countries, and one was the Babylonian. One of them was a Babylonian superpower, and there were many superpowers nearby to Israel country. So is near the country Israel. So there were uh, namely two superpowers. Okay, so these two superpowers were given some kind of money by their kings. The As I told you earlier, the at the reign of King Joachim, the great grandson of King David, this country was split up into two parts. One was Judah and one was the northern side. So northern side was ruled by the descendant of King David. So King David, King Solomon, you can see in the slide, they started worshipping other gods. They disobeyed the commandments, God's commandments. Okay, they firstly they started worshipping other gods. Okay, they disobeyed the commandments. Okay, God's commandments, and they refused to obey. This was the main point. They refused to obey the prophets whom God has sent to them. So God had sent to them many prophets, to the kings, to come back to the God. But due to some or the other reasons, for power and more power, they used to have alliances with the nearby countries. They used to pay some, in order to keep the peace, they used to pay some kind of lump sum money. And this money they used to tax from the local people. And they used to pay that money to maintain the peace. Okay, so King Solomon's disobedience, you can see King Solomon's disobedience resulted in his kingdom being divided at his death. Okay, but as soon as the power of the throne, this was mainly due to the because the kings were selfish. They wanted more power. They were hungry about the power. They want more money. They want more power. So this led to the disobedience, and this made God very angry, and God decided to punish Israel. So you can see this is a picture of the superpowers who were supposed to attack Israel at that point of time, but they didn't attack because Israel used to pay some kind of lump sum money to maintain the peace. So this story is about Babylonian captivity. Okay, Babylon is a prominent superpower at that point of time in Israel, so nearby Israel. So that country attacked Israel, and they took forcefully whatever belonged to the Israelites, and they forcefully took them as slaves, and they took them from some of them, most of them from Israel, to their neighboring countries as slaves. So this is a story about Babylonian captivity. So we have been saying Babylonian captivity many times, but what exactly is Babylonian captivity? We will just go through it so that you can better understand what is Babylonian captivity. So you can see in the slide, it is Babylonian captivity is also called Babylonian exile. Okay. Uh, why? Because namely the slaves were forcefully, so who were the slaves? The Jews of Israel were forcefully, detention means they are forcefully taken without their own personal will. They forcefully taken to another country. They were not given any rights. They were forced to do slavery. Okay. And from the kingdom of Judah, and the captivity followed the conquest of Judah. This was the prominent ruler of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of Babylon. He was a prominent king at that point of time, the most mightiest king and prominent king. And it was in this period that political instability was high in Israel. Okay, instability was more in Israel. The kings were very weak. The Israel kings were very weak, and they reigned for only a few period, means for few years or maybe few days. Okay, when they came into power. So Babylon decided to attack. It was attacking Judah, the southern part of Israel, many times. You can see over here. So many times they had attacked Judah, the southern part, okay, of Israel. Uh, as a result of attacking many times, the city of Judah and the temple of Jerusalem were plundered and destroyed, and the people of Jerusalem were forcefully taken as captives to Babylon. So they were forcefully taken. You can refer this Bible verse, uh, uh, 2 Kings 24, verse 25. It is written in the 2 Kings that um, the Israelites were forcefully taken. And what all you want to know about Babylonian captivity or Babylonian exile, you will come to know in detail when you read 2 Kings chapter 24. Now there were some effects of the exile. Some of the effects are primarily four observable visible effects. First effect is, you can see on the slide, it is Israel had been independent nation, lost his freedom and identity. Okay, is the first point. Israel, which had been a independent nation, okay, independent nation, lost its freedom because another country attacked them and became a vassal country under Babylon. So it became one of the countries under Babylon. Babylonian people had attacked many countries, so this was one of the country. So it came under the influence of Babylon. So Babylon tried to control it at this point of time. Then this is the key point. The temple of Jerusalem, you can see the temple of Jerusalem was the pillar of spirituality. It was the center of spirituality and an expression of the unity of the country, was destroyed. Okay, at the time of this king Nebuchadnezzar. So the temple was destroyed. So you can correlate the picture what we had seen in the second slide, the destruction of the temple of Jerusalem. Okay, now we will come to the third point. Kingships and palaces and systems were given protection to people dissipated. So certain kings were given protection. Okay, and they were given some they had signed some agreements. Now fourth point is significant section of the Jews lived in Judah. Okay, whosoever lived in Judah were taken forcefully captives to Babylon, and they resided, some of them resided in their homeland Israel, but most of them were taken forcefully to Babylon to serve as slaves. Okay. Now, the spiritual consequences of the exile. There were some spiritual consequences of the exile. Okay, the first spiritual consequences, you can see the temple of Jerusalem is the pillar. Okay, it is the spiritual and material center and the source of unity for all Israelites. Okay, for all Israelites, it is the corner pillar stone. Like it is the most important thing, the temple of Jerusalem. So you can read in Malachi 2, second verse 1, and Kings 8, verse 13, Ezekiel 43, verse 7 regarding this. Okay, that it is a spiritual center and a source of unity for all Israelites. Now, when the temple was destroyed, this is the key part which is uh, related to our Babylonian captivity. So, when the temple was set on fire, okay, you can see it is mentioned in Second Corinthians and in Lamentations. Okay, First Lamentations verse 10, and in Corinthians chapter 25 verse 9. The people lost all hope and were torn into despair. Okay, the all Israelites were had an hopeless feeling, and they were all very much saddened. Okay, the people of Israel retained similar faith regarding the throne and the kingship of David. They believed that the stability of the kingship was promised by God. Okay, most of them believed that the kingship, the prominent, like in in the holy scriptures, it was written that if you serve the Lord of Israel, that your reign will never come to an end. Your power will never come to an end. Okay, that is you can see Second Samuel verse 7. Okay, you can see that. Now Israelites believed that the king who sat on the throne of David was the son of God. Okay, they believed that whosoever sat in the place of David where he sat on the throne, he was the king of Israel. So whosoever sat on that throne, they were son of God, like they were most holiest person. They also thought that the kingship was a means to obtain God's mercy. Okay, kingship was the means to obtain God's mercy. So here two key points are there. The spiritual life greatly dependent on God. Okay, the land dependent on God, the land, priesthood, worship of Jehovah, whom they called God, Jehovah, and the scriptures and recitals of Psalms. Psalms used to recite in their holy place. We will tell a detail about that, where they used to read their holy scriptures. So, the spiritual life of Israelites dependent on God, the given land, like the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, and the priesthood, the worship of Jehovah, the scriptures, and the recital of Psalms. The Psalms used to recite in one of their synagogues. So these synagogues had the primary importance. We'll come to that in the later on slides. Okay, we'll discuss that later. But after losing their homeland, they had to live in a strange land. Okay, so these all things are mentioned if you read Jeremiah 31 verse 32 and Psalms 137 verse 4. Now the changes in the religious life during the exile. So during the exile, there were certain changes in their lifestyle. Okay, the three primary changes, I'll just read it out to you. These three primary changes were there. When the Israelite lost the temple of worship, this is the first point what we are reading. When the Israelites lost the temple of worship and offerings at the temple, their homeland, during the exile, certain religious form came into prominence. Number one, it is the worship at the temple of Jerusalem was highly centralized. These people used to go to the temple of Jerusalem to worship. Now, since they were in another country, they couldn't go to the temple because they were forcefully taken to another country as slaves, so they were not able to go for worship. Jews came there to worship when they were in near at the temple of Jerusalem. They used to come all the way from Samaria, which is very far over there, and from Galilee. They used to come all the way from Samaria and Galilee just for the important festivals to pray to the Lord and just to be in the holy temple. Okay, so after destruction, this is our point which is related to our Babylonian captivity. So after destruction of the temple, Jews assembled for worship at the synagogues at various localities. Okay, Jews, they assembled at various synagogues. Synagogues, in a sense, a holy place where they recite the scriptures. They continuously read the scriptures, the Torah. Uh, Jews used to read from the holy scriptures. The holy scriptures was the Torah, and these scriptures they used to recite continuously over there. So you can have a look at Saint Luke chapter 2 verse 24 and Saint Matthew chapter 21 in order to get an idea what the synagogues, what was done in the synagogues. So there are also references to people assembling locally for worship. So this local place was called synagogue. Okay, you can see in Luke also. Saint Luke chapter 6 verse 6 and Saint Luke chapter 7 verse 5. So second important point is that second change what happened is, you can see we are reading this point now. It is during the period of exile there were certain religious rituals which became very significant. This is very important. It is still there. Okay, one of them is observation of Sabbath. Sabbath. Okay, Sabbath. You can see in Genesis here assumes the importance and relevance during this period. So during this period, the Sabbath, the practice of coming in a particular day and reciting all these holy scriptures at a particular holy place near the synagogues, the Jews used to do this ritual, the practice, and that day was called the day of Sabbath. They never used to do any kind of work. They used to sit from morning to evening reading these holy verses. Okay, now in Sabbath there were books. The books you can see in book of Nehemiah. It is written in 4 chapter 4 verse 5, chapter 6 verse 3, and chapter 9 verse 14, and so on. And Ezekiel also, it is written that they used to gather in particular places. Okay, since they were not able to go to the temple of Jerusalem, they used to gather in particular places and used to recite these scriptures. So at one particular day they used to follow one particular day as the day of the Lord. They used to recite these scriptures at a day called Sabbath, and that day they used to just read the holy scriptures. So observance of Sabbath, one should rather understand that people of Israel always believed that the God's greatness and mercy is always greater than one's own effort. That you need to understand. So Israelites firmly believed in God's greatness and mercy than their own capabilities. Okay, the third point, we'll come to the third point now. So another important development what happened during the exile was the compilation of scriptures and other books. So most of the books included in our Holy Bible was taken from these narrations. At that point of time there was nothing written. we had an oral tradition, reading and interpretation of books. Okay, and these books used to be recited continuously at the synagogues. So once you go to a particular synagogues, the holy scriptures is continuously recited. So this oral tradition in a sense, there was nothing written in written form. So people used to narrate this to their younger generation, and the younger generation used to narrate those things to the another generation. So this many years this tradition was followed. There was nothing written, and orally this was this what all things was read and what all things were understood at that point of time by Jews were communicated to the next younger generation in form of the scriptures orally recited to the younger generation. That is called oral tradition. Okay, it was not written form. So these stories became written documents. Some people started writing these documents, and say these written documents are now included in the Holy Bible. Okay, the story of creation and most of the tradition connected with the fathers, the tribes, the Moses got recorded during this period of exile. When they were in Babylon, they recorded these things. Okay, they started forming, they writing books, and they recorded these things. So this was a small narration about the third chapter, captivity, mainly the Babylonian captivity. We have covered just brief points, okay, here and there. So these are the important points which would be very much helpful for your written exams. So these points are taken from the textbook itself. So most of the points are taken from the textbook itself. So now you came to know regarding those two pictures, right? One picture was shown to you first in the second slide was the destruction of the temple of Jerusalem. Second was shown was synagogues. So these two things are related to Babylonian captivity. This had happened at the time when people were taken, Israelites were forcefully taken to Babylon as the slaves. So these two pictures, now you came to know the full meaning, the inner meaning. This because they were not able to go to a temple of worship in their foreign land. So they used to um, they used to collect, they used to gather locally, and they used to recite these things. Okay, so those places were called holy places, and they used to refer to them as synagogues. So thank you so much for watching. Okay, thank you so much.